We have 21 games by my count. Night one of a 5-day marathon. Week one of college football is finally here. 5 ranked teams are on the road this weekend. 3 ranked on ranked games. We have 5 consecutive days of football. Phil Steele, welcome into the Phil Steele Show. Kyle Schassburger Tripp Hurd and the Godfather himself, the Titan of the college football preview magazine world, Phil Steele, on Twitter, on X at PhilSteele042. Phil, how the hell are you? Tripp is still recovering, maybe hitting the dark liquor a little too much after the Florida State defeat in Dublin, but and he's not looking forward to talking about the Noles and BC on Monday night to wrap up a monster weekend of college football, Phil.
Yeah, I tell you what, I work on all year round is college football, 365 days a year, and it's always a lot more fun when the games are being played. And 97 games this weekend. That's a lot of football to digest.
A lot of football. We have the 21 tonight on Thursday, and no ranked on ranked games until Saturday. We'll hit on games from every single day. The standalone ones on Sunday with USC and LSU, and then Boston College and Florida State and Tallahassee coming up on a Monday. I'm in zombie mode, Tripp. I don't know about you. We're running on fumes. We have a lot of heavy lifting to do around the Learfield offices and getting all of these broadcasts ready, which, by the way, quick plug before we jump into these games, and we have nearly 30 on the docket that we want to run through over the next 60 minutes. When you're out of town, want to keep up with live college sports, be sure to download the free Varsity Network app, available for both Apple and Android. Listen to college sports live with the Varsity Network app, live play-by-play. Over 100 official school podcasts, coaches shows, archive games, all out-of-market games. Tripp, are you feeling alive? Are you ready to get going?
Barely, but yes, I'm ready to get going. And I think Thursday is going to be a lot of fun. This is a game, the first game I want to start with here. It wasn't originally on the dock. I kind of forced it up there because NC State fans have really been chirping. They've been chirping loud, and they got even louder after Florida State lost last weekend. So, look, you've got locks, you've got leans. I've got a hunch on this game that Western Carolina not going to win the game, but 32.5 is what I've got the line at right now. I'll take the Catamounts in that big 32 points, 7 o'clock kick. Phil, do you have any read on this one here?
You know, I was just looking to see what my computer had on the game, and my computer's got it 41-14, which would be or 51-15. I made it 41-14, with the main thought process being Tennessee. And that, of course, is the game on deck and a game you have to be concerned with. And when you look at Western Carolina, they're a team that last year went 7-4. They were a competitive team. And so I would agree with you. I think that the dog in this one is probably worth a slight look.
Breaking in a new voice, too. The Wolfpack Matt Chasnow, good friend of the program, and, of course, Learfield, former voice of Washington State, moving back to the East Coast, Syracuse grad, but voice of the Wolfpack, and listen on the Varsity Network app. That game teed up at 7 o'clock tonight. I'm going to stay within the triangle, Phil. UNC is going on the road, first time ever to Minneapolis. They had won 7 straight roadies before losing 3 last season on the road. Won't leave North Carolina again after this game until nearly Halloween, end of October at Virginia Tech. 6th year for Mac Brown in his second tour with the Tar Heels. They're given 2 points, the over-under at 50, 8 o'clock on Fox. Phil, first time since 2018. Tar Heels are starting the season without Sam Howell or Drake May under center. It appears to be Max Johnson, but there's a lot of gamesmanship. Both P.J. Fleck and Mac Brown are playing possum with their depth charts. There's a lot of that going on, plus weather could be an issue.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a chance of thunderstorms for the game, so you worry a little bit about that. And you know, with the loss of Drake May, 2 years ago, Drake May was fantastic. 38 touchdown passes, just 7 interceptions. But last year, Drake May only threw for 24 touchdowns. And I think whoever wins the starting quarterback job this year, and I did project Max Johnson as my guy, I think Johnson could top that total. So I'm not thinking they're losing a guy that was super productive last year because he only threw 24 touchdown passes. They still have a Murray and Hampton back at the running back spot. I liked North Carolina when they were the dog. Now they're, of course, the favorite in this one. I still like North Carolina to win the game. Maybe your best play in this one might be the over, though. When I take a look at it, last year Minnesota got underwhelming quarterback play as well. In fact, Kelly McManus tossed 9 interceptions, only hit 53% of his passes. Max Brosmer comes in. He was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy award that they give in the FCS. And I think he's going to light up that Minnesota offense a little bit. Total's low. It's only 50 in this one, so I'm going to go with over for the North Carolina Minnesota game. Should be a really good game, though. I'm high on both teams, but the one thing, if you're a Tar Heel fan, look at that schedule because After this game, they host Charlotte, host NC Central, host James Madison, at Duke, host Pitt, host Georgia Tech, at Virginia. They could very well be favored in their next 7 games if they win this one.
We'll get to Charlotte and JMU a little bit later. I am sporting for College Colors Day, which is coming up on Friday. We're going to celebrate in the lobby with wings, food, trips at home. He's coming to you if you're watching on the Varsity Network channel, Varsity channel on YouTube, the Phil Steele Show. You can get it there as well as all of our College Sports Now shows. Charlotte is playing very hurt, according to Biff Poggi. More on that game coming up. Amarian Hampton, who you referenced, Phil, one of 6 returning All-ACC players for the Tar Heels, and maybe a wet track if rain, thunderstorms are a problem. Could make for a wacky game. Could be some points. I side with you. I think 50 is low for a total.
Yeah, and, Minnesota's got a pretty good running back as well, and Darius Taylor.
Huge opportunity for UNC to get off to a hot start. You're right there, Phil. Let's jump to the other 8 o'clock kick, North Dakota State at Colorado. This game's been getting a lot of attention here, and I'm hearing a lot of love on the North Dakota State side, honestly, with these points. But, Colorado really limped down the stretch the season. They lost their last 6 games. They were 2-8 over their last 10. Shadur Sanders back in the saddle. He's the guy that people were talking about in the Heisman race. Do you think North Dakota State can slow him down?
I love the skill players from Colorado, no doubt about it. Shadur Sanders, one of the best quarterbacks out there. They've got Travis Hunter at wide receiver and a defensive back, and one of the most electrifying players in the country. And North Dakota State just lost their head coach. Matt Entz is now the linebacker coach at USC of all places. So you wonder about that. But I do like North Dakota State in the trenches here. When you look at Colorado last year, their offensive line struggled. Part of that, Sanders held onto the ball a little too long at times, but 56 sacks and only 2.2 yards per carry. All 5 starters are gone. All 5 starters are new on the offensive line. And I don't like that kind of movement when it comes to offensive line. I like to have a little bit more cohesiveness. And so I think in a first game of a season, North Dakota State, strong at the line of scrimmage, could be able to hang within this number. I think Colorado wins it, but I'll take North Dakota State plus the points.
Yeah, I agree with you, Phil. That culture, NDSU, what they've built themselves over as the standard of FCS football. It's been SDSU, their rival to the South, who's won the last 2 national championships at the FCS level. But breaking a new coach, I think they hang around. If you're Colorado, though, don't write anything that would suggest negative connotations against Deion Sanders and the Colorado program, that's for sure. 8 o'clock, CBS Sports Network, Coastal at Jacksonville State. Gamecocks are given 354.5 is the total. Third meeting last time here was in 2016 when both were in the FCS. Got that nugget out of your magazine, Phil. 30th edition of the most accurate college football preview magazine that's been out there over the last 29 years. Grayson McCall has moved on to NC State, no longer a shot. Tim Beck, head coach, responding with a new quarterback, Ethan Vasco, a sometimes viral TikToker is what I read about Vasco is going to be under center. What do you think of the shots covering the number on the road?
Yeah, Vasco played last year, hit 62% of his passes with a 7-1 ratio, so he's very familiar with the offense. But I lean with Jacksonville State. I love what Rich Rod's doing. Each of his first 2 years here, since they've been in the magazine, he has outperformed my expectations. And you go back to last year, for example, a phenomenal year, really above where I had them picked. And I think when you take a look at Jacksonville State, they're a tough team. They're at home, playing with revenge here. Remember last year they lost this game 30-16 against a Coastal Carolina that had Grayson McCall, at the quarterback spot. So I actually like Jacksonville State minus the points.
Let's stay with your boy here as we move to Friday now, the first of a couple of games we want to highlight on Friday evening, day 2 of 5 straight in college football, week 1, Western Michigan at Wisconsin, year 2 for Luke Fickell. The Badgers, 23.5-point favorite is my last check, 56.5 total, 9 o'clock on FS1. 14 returning starters for Luke Fickell. Phil, a team that was really embattled by injuries a year ago. They've won 16 straight season openers against non-conference foes. You have them in the middle of a loaded 18-team new look Big Ten.
That's a lot of teams to try to predict a conference. And I got one of my pet peeves this year when writing the magazine, 18, 17, 16 team conferences, no divisions. But when you look at Wisconsin, I think they will be improved. Now they bring in Tyler Van Dyke. Van Dyke started out the season red hot at Miami of Florida and then really tailed off in the second half. All reports I have is that he's blending in well. They do get Ches Maluzzi back. He's healthy right now. He, of course, keeps getting injured, but if Maluzzi stays healthy, they should have a good run game. Defensively, they look good. Last year, as you mentioned, injuries, I think, really played havoc with Wisconsin. So I like the Badgers this year, but I also like Western Michigan. And when I look at Western Michigan, I see a team that in the first year for Lance Taylor last year, they were extremely inexperienced. This year, they're extremely experienced. In fact, I think they'll be one of the most improved teams in the MAC this year. My number on this one, I like to do all my forecasts prior to seeing the Vegas line, and I had Wisconsin minus 24, and they're what, 23 and a half. So I don't see a clear thing. I would find trouble going against either of these two teams. I think you have a couple of play on teams this year.
Badgers were your number one surprise team last year, if I remember correctly, right, Phil?
Yeah, and then like I said, the injuries really derailed them during the course of the year.
All right, let's jump to the late kick on Friday, 10:30. TCU at Stanford. The Horned Frogs laying 9.5. The total's 59.5. TCU really struggled last year. I mean, the Colorado game kind of threw them for a loop. I don't think they ever really recovered from that. They need to get off to a fast start this year. They'll get that opportunity because they're a 9.5-point favorite on the road at Stanford, a team that's, I think their win total's like 3.5 games this year. What do you expect in game one from Sonny Dykes?
Stanford's a vastly improved team over last year. Last year, they basically lost everybody. And when they lost players to the transfer portal, these were guys that graduated and moved on, getting that Stanford degree. So you got to love that. You got to figure this year they're vastly more experienced, one of the most improved experience-wise. They played a lot of freshmen and sophomores last year. They've got an electric wide receiver in Alec A.M. Manor. And then, so I think they are improved. However, every time I do a Learfield podcast with Wayne Cook and Steve Hartzell, Wayne always points out that Stanford doesn't have a home crowd. And I looked it up. They're just 4-15 against the spread at home without that home crowd. And the students haven't started yet. Classes haven't started yet for Stanford. So you got to think TCU will not be intimidated by the crowd. This is a TCU team that 2 years ago was playing in the national championship game, then slipped to a losing record last year. They make my most improved list. I think TCU will be a vastly improved team. I do think they're more talented. Coach Dykes has this team poised to actually make some noise in the Big 12 this year. So even though Stanford's vastly improved, they had some ground to make up. I'll take TCU. Surprise the numbers in single digits for this one. I thought it would be double digits.
Another nugget I took from your mag to Charlotte for ACC kickoff. Stanford was the only FBS team, Phil, to go winless at home all of last year. So they get TCU, team that is just 2 years removed from the national title game. Horned Frogs come in 9.5-point favorites. Tripp.
Yeah, let's get to Saturday. This will be one of the, most heavily betted games of the weekend, you would think. Clemson against Georgia, top-ranked Georgia. The Dogs right now, I see them as minus 13. I've seen it 13.5, all the way up to 14. The total's 49. It's a noon kick at the Benz in Atlanta for this game. Carson Beck back in the saddle for Georgia. They're going to get tested by what should be a pretty stout Clemson defense in this opener. I do think Georgia's the best team on paper, but it's big game Dabo. You know how this guy does. I mean, what do you think here, Phil? Can the Tigers hang around?
Yeah, I definitely like Clemson plus the points. I think it's always been, whenever these teams meet, you can go all the way back to 1977. And by the way, if you check out PhilSteele.com on Phil Steele Plus and take a look at my Clemson side here. Oops, it's a little. There we go. We've got the results all the way back to 1976 spread wise, and you could look and see if you looked at this closely. And it's probably not the best thing to show because I don't think everything's shown, but dog. The dog covers in this series 15-4 against the spread the last 19 years, and it's not just that. I like Clemson. Everybody's beating up Dabo because he didn't hit the transfer portal. But guess what? He only lost 3 players out of the 2 deep to the transfer portal. So no need to bring in players, create a toxic atmosphere. I mean, they've got probably the best culture of any team out there. They've got everybody who's recruited to Clemson, came to Clemson. And their receiving core has been banged. Last year got really banged up. Their top 2 guys went down early in the year. Those 2 guys are back. They had in some super true freshmen. They actually have a vastly upgraded receiving core this year to go along with Cade Klubnik, go along with that defense, go along with the veteran offensive line. And I think Clemson's going to make some noise. And keep in mind, in their 4 losses last year, 94-60 first down edge. So they weren't getting blown away at the line of scrimmage, and just the opposite. They were fumbling going into the end zone, missing key field goals, and they were a team that was much better than their record. So I think this is going to be your typical Clemson Georgia game. I like Clemson to take this one down to the wire.
Clemson just couldn't finish drives, and I was at that season opener at Wallace Wade Stadium, a raucous environment against Clemson on Labor Day last year when Clemson had a few of those turnovers, right there on the precipice of scoring the football when the Blue Devils shocked the Tigers to start the 2023 campaign. Both teams have not released depth charts. They're blank. They're not even available for you to look at. So there's some more of the game of possum that the head coaches in Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart are playing along, and they're not the only ones here ahead of week one. So that one's at noon in the ATL at the Benz, a de facto home game, but still Clemson not far away. Let's go to a couple other somewhat neighboring teams who are very familiar with each other. And college football is a lot better when Penn State and West Virginia are playing annually. It is the 8th-ranked Nittany Lions given 8 points, 51.5 at WVU, 12 o'clock for Morgantown on Fox. Phil, classes have been canceled Friday already, ahead of the masses traveling the country roads, and most notably, Pat McAfee's returned to campus to do his show before going to College Station for ESPN Game Day. And while the Nittany Lions have won 51 of 60 all-time meetings between these two teams, they have dominated the all-time series. This is a game you really, from your perspective, aren't feeling too strongly about either way.
Yeah, I can make a case for both teams. I do think Penn State's the better team here. When you look at them, I like Drew Allar at the quarterback spot last year. Had an outstanding 25-2 ratio. They've got Allen and Singleton at running back. And the biggest difference, I think, in this game between the two teams, because West Virginia is loaded on offense as well, with White and Donaldson at running back and Garrett Green at quarterback, is the defense. Penn State defense, there is no weakness. It's one of the top defenses in the country. West Virginia, a lot of transfers in the secondary, some question marks at linebacker. So there's a few question marks defensively. However, I just did a West Virginia podcast earlier today, and they are fired up in West Virginia. So they're talking about one of the biggest home games ever. West Virginia last year proved that when they were the underdog, they did extremely well. They were picked last in the Big 12 and did much better than would indicate. They've got the run game. I think it's going to be a heck of a game to watch. I do think Penn State wins the game, but laying over a touchdown, I had it in that 7-10 range as well. So I have no selection spread-wise in this game. I do think it's going to be a great and fun game to watch.
It'll be a great environment as well. Now or never, maybe, for James Franklin this year to lead his team to the CFP in the new 12-team format. Divisions being scrapped in the 18-team Big Ten. They don't draw Michigan at all, and they get Ohio State at home. Also at noon, teed up from the Music City, the start of year 3 for Brent Pry and Kyron Drones as they take on Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, who was my pick to win the ACC in the preseason. I was in Nashville a few weeks ago, start of the month. I think I'm still recovering from all the stairs on Broadway, but love Kyron Drones. He's built like a DN. Virginia Tech, though, 1-4 straight up in road openers, 0-5 against the spread in the last handful of games. Year 4 for Clark Lee, Phil. 2-10 last year, 9-17 overall, picked again in the SEC, in the magazine, and most everywhere else to finish last. It's an uphill battle. They do have a new quarterback, though, Phil. Curious what you think about Diego Pavia, who is the reigning CUSA Player of the Year coming from New Mexico State. Had relieved himself. I think he became famous for relieving himself at the New Mexico practice facility on the Lobos logo, but he's joining former coaches Jerry Kill and another Tim Beck on Clark Lee's staff.
Yeah, I tell you, Pavia really impressed me. He's an ex-wrestler, which is unusual for a quarterback. He's a guy that can play like a fullback when needed. Hit 62% of his passes, had an outstanding ratio last year, 26-8, and he is something that to be concerned with. However, Virginia Tech is the stronger team here. You talked about Drones at the quarterback spot. They're one of the most experienced teams in the country. They're loaded on defense, and most Virginia Tech's wins come by big margins. If you take a look at their wins last year, there wasn't any close ones. They usually won and won big. And then when I talked about Stanford's home field edge, Vanderbilt has the opposite of a home field edge. Generally, when Vanderbilt takes the field, let's face it, Nashville's a great place to go visit. Virginia Tech's not far away. They're going to have a ton of fans there. It wouldn't surprise me if Virginia Tech even had the crowd edge here. Spread's under 2 touchdowns. I think the better team is Virginia Tech. They're going to be fired up for this opener. I like Virginia Tech minus the points.
Yeah, you hit it there. Another key number. It's under 14 right now. So if you can grab it at 13.5, you might want to go ahead and get on that one. Let's bounce over to the 2:00 start. Oklahoma State. They'll be hosting South Dakota State. Cowboys favored by 9.5. The total's at 54.5. I think Oklahoma State, very streaky last year. They got off to a slow start. Then they ran off 4 in a row. We all fell in love with them again. Then they kind of stumbled to the finish. But this year, I've been leaning Oklahoma State for a while in this game. I just think I'm not as concerned with style points anymore for teams trying to blow other teams out when they have the opportunity, because it doesn't matter as much now with the 12-team playoff. But I do think when you've got a Heisman contender, you want to take care of them. And Oklahoma State's got one of those in Ollie Gordon. I think they'll try to get him involved early and often in this, Phil.
Yeah, and I think the key is going to be Alan Bowman. Last year, coming into the season, it was a 3-quarterback battle: Bowman, Gundy, Rangel. Bowman did take over the starting job, and that's when they took off. They won and covered 5 straight games in a row. Bowman only had a 15-14 ratio on the year. I think he will be a much improved quarterback this year. And Oklahoma State last year was one of the least experienced teams in the country. This year, they're one of the most experienced teams in the country. In fact, number 1, I believe, on my experience chart. So this is a dangerous Oklahoma State team at home. They'll be fired up. And the thing is, generally, when an FBS team plays an FCS team, you overlook them. You're looking at your next opponent. You don't take them seriously. Who the heck is not going to take South Dakota State seriously? I mean, every time South Dakota State lines up against an FBS school, they seem to upset them. They finished national champ again last year. So there's the South Dakota State team you definitely will be on guard for, no doubt about that. And South Dakota State lost a lot off last year's squad. They've got Gronkowski back at the quarterback position. But overall, I think Oklahoma State's a better team. Will take care of business at home. Had this been double digits, I might think a little differently, but single digits, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State at home.
First meeting between those two during Gundy's tenure, 15-0 straight up, and 8-4 ATS against FCS teams. 54.5 is the total I'm seeing against the Jacks. I personally think that's way too big of a number against South Dakota State. So I would side with the reigning 2-time FCS national champions there. Let's go to the meat of the schedule on Saturday. 3:30 start. Ohio State, maybe the most talented roster in the country. Second-ranked team behind top-ranked Georgia. They're hosting Akron. 48.5-point favorites. 58 the total. 3:30 as part of the new look CBS package with their deal with the Big Ten. So this is the game being featured. Revamped roster, loaded running back room with the addition of Quinshawn Judkins. Get Will Howard over from Kansas State. And then Chip Kelly's offense. Chip Kelly leaving UCLA, becoming the OC under Ryan Day. Will that offense truly be unlocked, though, Phil, in this spot? Maybe not trying to unveil too much, but still with a new OC and so many new pieces. Can they cover the 58 against the lowly Zips?
I think it's 48, right?
48, yes.
Yeah. It was 50, and it's actually come down to 48, which is probably a little surprising with the amount of hype that Ohio State's getting this year. You know, I talked to a lot of Group of 5 coaches, and during the conversation, I would say, hey, coach, how are you going to treat this game? I mean, you got to keep your guys healthy for play. And a lot of the coaches, I'm not going to tell you specifically which ones or who, said, hey, you know what? That's in my mind. We got to stay healthy when we're playing this team. So, you know, while Akron might be fired up to be playing Ohio State, I don't think you're going to get all their starters playing the entire game. They want to stay healthy and come out of this alive. And Ohio State's got probably the best defense in the country. I think they're going to want to get that offense going. You're going to see the quarterback run a lot more this year with Will Howard, and they're backed up by a couple of guys where if Will Howard gets injured, they're still in good shape. So I think Ohio State will dominate the game, probably have a shutout. My original number on the game was 51-0. I can see 51-0, but I also did something on philsteele.com, which talked about favorites and underdogs and spread records. And the only 2 categories where the underdogs really had an edge, everything else is pretty much 50%. Were the upper categories, teams laying over 45, 46 points, something like that. So to me, I'm not going to lay 48 points, but so I'd lean with Ohio State if you have to play this game. But if you have to play this game, it might just be a problem gambler.
Yeah, 48.5 is the number. 58 is the total. So there's the confusion there. But the last time these two played, 2021, 59-7. So a 52-point victory for the Buckeyes against the Zips just a couple of years ago.
Only a problem when you lose, right? Let's go to another game that's going to see a lot of action this week in the Swamp. Miami checking in at number 19 in the preseason polls this year. They're a 2.5-point favorite against Florida in Gainesville, 3:30 kick ABC. I do think Miami is probably the better team right now with Cam Ward. He's an electric player, and I think he's going to make a huge difference. I think he'll be able to utilize some of those weapons down there that maybe some of the previous quarterbacks haven't been able to. But the Swamp, as an FSU fan, I can tell you that's a pretty tough place to get a win. How do you see this one unfolding in Gainesville, Phil?
Yeah, it's something interesting here, and perception of teams. The over/under win total on Florida is 4.5. The over/under win total on Miami is 10.5. So, what would your perception be? Miami's a lot better team, right?
Right.
But I tell you what, you put Florida into Miami, a Florida schedule, and all of a sudden, Florida is talked about as a potential top 10 team this year. Because look after Miami's game here. They play Florida A&M, Ball State, at USF, Virginia Tech at home, at Cal, at Louisville. At Louisville might be a tough one, but that's probably a pick-em game. Florida State at home, Duke at home, at Georgia Tech, which now does look tougher, but Wake Forest and at Syracuse. I don't know if Miami's going to be a dog in any of the rest of their games this season, even if they lose this opening game. And with Florida, yeah, look at those final 5 games: Georgia at Texas, LSU, Mississippi at Florida State. That's an amazing month of November. But that has nothing to do with the talent that's on the field. And last year, they beat a ranked Tennessee at home, led that thing 26-7 at the half. The Swamp is extremely tough. And when I talked to Coach Napier this year, my first thing was, Coach, that's a brutal schedule. And he said, Phil, at the end of the year, it may not look quite as tough. And I think what he was saying was, if they beat Miami, Texas A&M, Kentucky, LSU, and Ole Miss in the Swamp, which is very possible. I have number 19 in my power poll talent-wise. I have like number 50 in my top 40 because of the fact of their schedule. But it's an extremely talented team, and if they take care of business at home, all of a sudden you say their schedule wasn't as tough. I like Florida plus the points to pull the upset here.
Yeah, I think that's a coin flip game. It could really go either way. And another team missing off that Miami schedule, if you notice, was Clemson. They don't show up on that schedule, which is a good news for the Hurricanes as well. All right, let's jump to UTEP at Nebraska. Another 3:30 kick, and Nebraska, a 27.5-point favorite. The total sitting at 49. It's year 2 under Matt Rule. They've got a new quarterback to break in, but we're looking for a lot of improvement out of Nebraska, or at least I am. That's a big number to cover, though. I'm also interested to see if you have a read on that over under of 49, because Nebraska last year, they were a pretty good under team for us.
Yeah, they were extremely good under team. And part of the problem for Nebraska last year, and what Matt Rule was learning as the season went on, is the offense kept turning the damn ball over. And that's why they were losing games. And they've corrected that, I think, this year, bringing in Dominic Raiola at the quarterback spot. And I think that's going to open up the offense. In fact, a couple of teams this year talked about vastly improved wide receiver positions. One of them's Clemson. One of them's Auburn. Another one's Nebraska. In fact, when I talked to Coach Rule and was going over the team with them, he said that the receiving core went from a weakness to a strength this year. It's one of the team's strengths. So I think you're going to see a more potent offense for Nebraska. I would lean with the over on the total here, and I do like Nebraska. Now, Austin Peay last year under Scotty Walden averaged 34 points per game. He's hoping for a similar type of success that Texas State had last year. Remember, Texas State brought in Incarnate Word's head coach, G.J. Kinney, and Kinney had a really good first year. But Kinney's team had averaged 52 points per game. So the players he brought over averaged 18 points per game more. I do think Walden will have success this year, but it's a pretty tough defense to go against. This Nebraska defense last year allowed just 300 yards per game, and they're tough. I think you're going to see, though, UTEP open it up, play more of the Austin Peay type of offense, which would lend towards the over. I like Nebraska, and I would lean towards the over in this one as well.
I love the upside for Dylan Raiola. Can't wait to see what he can do in Lincoln for the Big Red Machine. The Scotty Walden reference has given me massive PTSD, Phil. I think he was one of 3 head coaches. He was the first interim, I think, after Jay Hobson during the COVID year in 2020 at Southern Miss. And as somebody that manages the Southern Miss Radio Network, that was absolute hell for me during the COVID season to make sure all the imaging and production was accurate and keep it up with who was the head coach of the Golden Eagles at that time. Let's go to the Dome. Ohio at Syracuse. The Orange breaking in the Fran Brown era. 17.5-point favorites, 46.5 total, 3:30 on ACC Network. Phil, I talked to 3 Syracuse guys at Media Days in Charlotte for the ACC. Fran Brown, LaQuinn Allen, returning running back and stud, and then Kyle McCord, the Ohio State transfer at quarterback. I love what Fran Brown is selling for the Cuse. Now, 17.5 as your first game and opener against a competent MAC team. I'm unsure about that, so I'm going to ask you. And is it 17.5, Tripp? Check me on that. Yeah, 17.5 is the total. I got it up. Don't worry, I got you. But I love Fran Brown. His mantra is DART. Being detailed, accountable, relentless, and tough in all aspects. He comes over from Georgia. What do you think about the Cuse at home in the debut game for Fran Brown?
Yeah, I like Syracuse and I like the over in this one for a couple of reasons. This Ohio defense reminds me of the 2022 Ohio defense. And that year, they surprised me in a couple of ways. They opened up the season in 2022, giving up like 48 points a game and 550 yards per game. And then all of a sudden, the second half of the season, they gave up like 330 yards per game. It was a 200-yard per game difference and a 20-point per game difference. What they did is they had a young defense. They used the first 4 or 5 games to get everybody set. And then once they were set, they played much better. And they had a good year, a great year in the MAC. Actually, made it all the way to the MAC championship game against Toledo. And I think they'd be happy with a similar type of situation. So I think Ohio is going to be a play the over at the early part of the year because of their defense. And I think they're going to give up some points. I lost Curtis O'Rourke at QB, but I think overall Ohio will be able to put some points on the board. I like Syracuse. I like the over in this one because of the Ohio defense. And I think Syracuse go on, put some points on the board. The Carrier Dome is extremely tough. It's been getting louder and louder, hasn't it, guys?
I think so. And I think it's only going to escalate even more with Fran Brown and the swagger and the attitude that he's bringing in as they build a new culture or enhance and refine what has been there previously. You know, there's been some great players that have come through Syracuse, and Fran Brown, I think, was the right guy for the job. Excited to see what he can do as his wings will be spread against Ohio this Saturday. That is a 3:30 game. Also, then another MAC team on the road at Northwestern, the Miami Redhawks. They are 3-point dogs, 39.5 on that new makeshift stadium for the Northwestern Wildcats. 15,000 it can seat at Lanny and Sharon Martin Stadium, right along the lakefront. They got the bleachers that are coming in. It's going to be a nice day. Weather's not going to be an issue early in the season, but man, when that weather and those temperatures drop, it's going to be frigid. It's going to make for quite the scene later in the season to see what kind of games the wind and the elements can play with the football. It's an $800 million rebuild of Ryan Field. And yes, Hartzell, I heard with him and Wayne Cook and you yesterday, he didn't know what lake it was. It's Lake Michigan, Hartzell. Come on. I was just pulling the hair that I don't even have out of my head during yesterday's podcast with you.
He's not good with maps.
No, I mean, come on, dude. Come on. That was the most disappointed I've ever been in Hartzell. Year 2 for David Brown, 8-5, 5-4 a year ago. And Miami's Chuck Martin, who's from my neck of the woods, south side of Chicago, Park Forest, went to Rich East High School. He's alleging that Alabama stole his kicker. Are they going to be able to function, Phil, without a kicker as the underdog against Northwestern this weekend?
Not only a kicker, but the Lou Groza Award winner at kicker. So they had a really good kicker last year. You know, they've got Gabbert back again for another season. How many years he's been there? 10, 12, something like that. And I actually think now, generally when teams are not in their home stadium, Kansas this year, for example, I think there's going to be games like when they play Iowa State in Arrowhead. I think Iowa State may even have the crowd edge. They lose their home field edge. But with Northwestern, I love this little stadium that they have right there off the lake. Fans are excited. I think it'll be packed. I think it'll be louder than their normal home games at Ryan Field used to be. So I actually think they're going to increase their home field edge by playing in that smaller stadium, something they're going to be pretty damn excited about. Now, the last time these two teams met, which was 2 years ago, Miami of Ohio pulled the upset. It was a game when I remember talking to Coach Fitzgerald the next year going over that, and he was just surprised they lost and too bitter about it. He thought they had the opportunity to clearly win that game. So I think you got Northwestern playing with somewhat of a revenge factor. They won't take Miami lightly. They're going to be excited. And this is a Northwestern team that, let's face it, last year, guys, if you would have given me an over-under win total on their regular season of 7.5 coming into the year, I wouldn't have a house right now because, I mean, Northwestern was expected to win 0 or 1 games and beating Utah in a bowl game, phenomenal. So I just love the job that their head coach, David Braun, is doing. I'm going to take Northwestern minus the points in this one.
All right, let's sneak another game in here. When I logged on, Kyle was talking out loud to himself and flip-flopping over Boise State at Georgia Southern. Right now, the Broncos are a 12.5-point favorite, totals at 57.5. I do see the reason you were flip-flopping on this one because I think there is some value with Georgia Southern out there. If you look at Boise State's record against their non-conference opponents here lately, I think they've lost 4 out of their last 5, and they don't tend to cover in those games either. What do you think on that one, Phil?
Yeah, and this one, I've been talking to Coach Helton at USC, talked to him at Georgia Southern, and this is the most bullish he's been on a team since I've talked to him. I mean, he's like, there is no ifs, ands, and buts. This is the best Georgia Southern team he's had in his 3 years there. They're 6-7, 6-7, but he thinks they're going to contend for the league title. And what he did in the first year at Georgia Southern was amazing, taking an option team, switching it to a pass offense, and getting to a bowl somehow. I thought that was pretty remarkable. So I'm bullish on Georgia Southern. You got the heat and humidity of Georgia. You've got a very talented, very experienced team. And I'm high on Boise. They're my pick to represent the group of 5 in the playoff this year. But it's a long road trip. It's in heat, humidity, and you're playing a really good Georgia Southern team. My line was 7. The line's 13.5. So I'm going to take the dog in this one. I like Georgia Southern.
Such a clash in styles, too, those two programs. I mean, Boise State has made them, you can't call them the new kid on the block anymore, but from a non-P4, non-autonomy conference type designation, they've become the standard for so long. And Georgia Southern from the FCS, such a proud history and culture. And I'm very high on Clay Helton and what he's doing there in Statesboro. But man, that's a tough one off the bat. The home field advantage at Paulson Stadium certainly could do some wonders for the Eagles at 4:00 on ESPNU. Final game before we get to the evening slate. Old Dominion at South Carolina, year 4 for Beamer ball. Gamecocks favored by 21, 4:15 on the SEC network. First meeting, South Carolina's won 7 of 9, or 7-2 is double-digit chalk favorites since 2020. We'll get to see the redshirt freshman quarterback, Phil, Lenoris Sellers at quarterback, and he's going to be sporting the rec specs. This guy hates to wear contacts, so he's going to be looking like he's wearing goggles underneath his helmet on Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And I'm bullish on South Carolina this year. They made my most improved list. Last year I thought their weakness was running the football. They frankly couldn't run it. Under 100 yards per game, 2.8 yards per carry. I think they at least double the rush total that they had last year because they've got better running backs. Last year, their offensive line just massively depleted by injuries. And as you talked about, Sellers is going to be a lot of fun to watch. He's a big boy, and he can really get downhill. And so I'm bullish on South Carolina. I think they're going to have a better defense than expected and do much better in the SEC than expected this year. But there's no freaking way I'm going against Ricky Ronnie. I mean, twice I had this guy picked as last in their thing, and they've got to bowl games 2 of the 3 years he's been there, which is really a remarkable accomplishment. ODU can possibly shrink the game. I do like how South Carolina is beat up teams they're supposed to beat up in the past. But there's that game next week at Kentucky, and then they play LSU the next week. So I like both teams. And 21 is where I had my number. 21 is where the number's at. I'm passing on this game, guys. What about you? One of you two got a strong pick on this one?
I don't. Tripp probably does. He's got a strong pick on everything.
I don't have a lock. I don't have a lean, and I don't even have a hunch on this game.
Wow.
I don't either. I don't feel good. I love Shane Beamer, but I don't feel good about this season for him. Unlike you, Phil, it seems like you think he may survive the season. I do not. If we're going to ask that question, is Shane Beamer still the head coach next year? I think he's just going to become a casualty of the schedule, and I hate to see it, but that's why we play the game. So Notre Dame and Texas A&M are playing a very big game right out of the chute on Saturday night. 7th-ranked Fighting Irish. Injury problems all along the offensive line. A remade offensive line going into what the new EA Sports college football video game is tabbed as the #1 most hostile environment of all of college football, and that's Aggie Land in College Station. So we're going to see that on full display at 7:30 on ABC. The Aggies are 3-point favorites at home. Year 1 for Mike Elko, who coached Riley Leonard over the previous couple of seasons at Duke. Leonard is over from the Blue Devils to the Fighting Irish. Is it an upgrade over Sam Hartman from a year ago? The Notre Dame fan in me, and yes, I'm wearing an Irish hat. You can see the clover on the front of the back of my hat. I say yes, but Notre Dame cannot afford to stumble out of the chute. They don't have the same luxury, Phil, that Florida State has, where they can win a conference title. Notre Dame cannot win a conference title. They can only be seated as high as 5 in the new 12-team CFP, and if they lose this one against what is a very weak schedule, there aren't many opportunities to make up for it if they were to lose the second game. They'd have to run the table. That's the only way I feel good about it. What's your make on the Aggies and the Fighting Irish under the lights in College Station?
I think when you take a look at the game, talent-wise, I'm going to give a slight edge to Notre Dame. I think they are probably the better team. And when you look at their schedule, as you mentioned, they could very well be favored in their final 11 games this year after this one. This is the toughest game of the season for them. Situation-wise, I think it favors Texas A&M. You look at Mike Elko. He prepared for Notre Dame last year because Duke played him. He knows Riley Leonard inside and out. And when I talked to Coach Elko this spring, he actually made a strong statement saying this might be the best defense he's ever coached. Now, Mike Elko's had some pretty damn good defenses. 2 years ago, I think they allowed, 15, 18 points per game, or 3 years ago at Texas A&M. So they're going to be tough there. Offensively, they get their quarterback back in not Max Johnson. Connor Wegman is back after being injured last year. And as you mentioned, College Station, unbelievable environment. So I think Notre Dame's a better team. I think Texas A&M deserves to be favored. I had A&M by 3. And guess what? The line's 3 on this one as well.
Well, a couple things, Kyle. If Notre Dame could just stop being stuck up, they could just join the ACC, and then they wouldn't have that issue.
We don't need to. We have access to the national champ until we lose access to the national. And yes, I'm saying until access is lost to the national championship. There is no need to join a league.
That's fair.
Okay.
Number 2, you mentioned they have a banged up offensive line. Texas A&M is not the team you want to play with a banged up offensive line. I think one guy in the transfer portal, the biggest get in that portal all season was probably Nick Scorton from Purdue. He'll be playing for Mike Elko now, and they're going to get after it on defense. I lean Texas A&M here, but I think it's going to be a good game. The quarterback play too. Riley Leonard, I agree with you, Kyle. I think he is a little bit of an upgrade. No disrespect at all to Sam Hartman. But the quarterback for A&M, Wegman, when he's been healthy, he's played pretty well. So I don't think it's a horrible play on the the over here, just because I think generally the public perception is going to be these are two defensive teams, but I like the offensive talent here. So I don't think the over is a bad play either.
Yeah, and Sam Hartman, a beautiful man. Look, him and Marcus Freeman last year, the best head coach quarterback combo, best looking combo in all of college football. But Riley Leonard is not too shabby himself. Year 3 for Marcus Freeman too, Phil. That's an important designation for Notre Dame head coaches. You learn everything you need to know about a guy in year 3. In South Bend. So looking forward to that. Popcorn game, as Phil described on the show, Doc, and I would agree. How are we pacing? We got about 8 games left, right, Tripp? And we're 2/3 of the way through the show. So let's get this train moving.
We'll zip through it here. Fresno State at Michigan. Wolverines, number 9 in the polls, coming off that national championship, but Jim Harbaugh's gone. J.J. McCarthy's gone. Roman Wilson's gone. A lot of turnover for Michigan, and it's a 21-point spread against Fresno State. 45.5 is the total. How do you see things playing out in the Big House?
Yeah, I think in this one, Michigan is a team that defensively they're stout. They're top 5 in the country. You have questions on the offensive line whether they lose all 5 starters and who's the quarterback going to be. But while Texas is on deck, I think the fact they have those questions on the offense actually helps Michigan in this sense. They need to give this new quarterback, and I think it'll be Alex Orji, some confidence coming in. They need that offensive line to perform well. And I had Fresno State still had Jeff Tedford as a head coach. I'd be careful because Jeff Tedford is one of the craftiest head coaches out there. He had won my college coach of the year once in the magazine and always enjoyed talking to him. Best of health to you, by the way, coach. And now they've got a different head coach coming in for Tim Skipper, first road game, and it's in the Big House. Michigan's defense going to crack down. I think that if Fresno scores a couple of points, it'll be good, fortunate. I'm actually going to lay the points in this one with Michigan because they need to get ramped up for that Texas game next week.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they're going to keep things close to the vest ahead of that big showdown with Texas Longhorns coming up in week 2. UCLA is a 2-touchdown favorite. 54 is the total at Hawaii. 7:30 start on CBS. This is the Bruins' first trip to the island since winning 32-7 during the 1938 season. Deshaun Foster is making his head coaching debut for the Bruins. Wayne Cook very high on Ethan Garbers at quarterback for UCLA. And Hawaii seems to have been a team, much like Michigan, the position they're in this weekend ahead of Texas. Seems like Hawaii was playing things coy last week against Delaware State.
Yeah, I liked Hawaii last week to win big. And at one point, after the opening drive of the second half, it was 14-14. Then they put them away, scored 3 touchdowns and won 35-14. But I don't think they were thinking about Delaware State at all. Maybe when Delaware State's plane got delayed, they said, hey, you know what? This isn't even going to be a game, and didn't bother to show up. In fact, one of their first half touchdowns was on a punt return. But I think we're going to see a completely different Hawaii team this week. And UCLA's making their first road trip with an inexperienced team versus a more experienced team. It's year 3 for Timmy Chang. Head coaches usually hit their stride in year 3, and I would expect that with Hawaii this year. So I think as bad as Hawaii looked last week, and I mean, what were they, like a 40-point favorite and only won by 21? I think we're going to see a much better Hawaii this week. I definitely like Hawaii plus the 2 touchdowns.
I tried to tell you guys Delaware State was going to rally after all those travel issues, but yeah, I like your play here too. I like Hawaii. I think there's some value there with 2 touchdowns. Let's bounce to Georgia State at Georgia Tech. Look, it's a 20.5-point spread. The only lean I've got here would be Georgia State, just because in typical fashion, Georgia Tech coming off the big win over Florida State, it's a good spot for a letdown. Do you have a read on this one?
Yeah, that's I think Georgia Tech, you give me this game during this season on a Saturday, Georgia Tech, I'll take by 31, 35 points. Win this thing easy. But not only coming off a trip to Ireland, travel back home, off a big win, Syracuse is on deck. You talk about a sandwich situation. That takes it from 35 all the way down to 21. I wouldn't play this game. I think Georgia Tech has the talent. And I like what Brent Key said after the game. They said, you're going to go grab yourself a couple of Guinnesses after this win. He's like, nope, it's Powerade. We got a game in 7 days. And if they can get the team focused like that, then look out for Georgia Tech. So I wouldn't play this game at all.
I hope Brent Key split the G in Dublin following that victory, that walk-off field goal against FSU in Dublin. James Madison, 8.5-point favorite, 48.5 total at Charlotte, 8 o'clock ESPNU. I know Stephen Hartzell is listening to this one for the Dukes take. He got that with you earlier in the week on the College Sports Now podcast feed. But Biff Poggi, second-year head coach, the former second in command, if you will, Jim Harbaugh's main man in Michigan. Year 2 for Poggi. He's a quirky guy. He's a different kind of animal. He said to the media this week that he's got 8 or 9 starters that are hurt, that might not be back for 3 to 4 weeks. He's already got 71 new players that he's working with on this 49ers roster this season, which is third most nationally. 2 other AAC teams are ahead of him. The quarterback seems to be available, though, for Charlotte. What do you think of the Dukes covering the 8.5, just over a touchdown? I think that's easy money if you're taking what Poggi said at face value.
Yeah, one thing I don't like to do is overreact to injuries. Like if a key player's out, a lot of times the line will move 2 to 3 points, and it's actually value on the other team. But 8 starters being out, that would be a reason to move it. I don't know who those starters are, though, believe it or not. And so you wonder, are those guys really out, and were they the starters? But I had James Madison by 7 originally. They're a team that needs to get going. I like talking to Coach Chesney. He brought over some players with him from his successful team and from the FCS. And I think the only way to look at this one would be James Madison if Charlotte is that beat up that Coach Poggi is saying.
All right, late night chase time. We've got New Mexico on the road at number 21, Arizona. New Mexico's got a game under their belt already. Arizona still a 31-point favorite. The total's at 58.5. The Wildcats do have their star quarterback, Noah Fafita, back. His best wide receiver, McMillan's also back for Arizona. Is there any value here with New Mexico with 31 points after they've, already kind of got a game under their belt? Do you see anything there worth looking at, Phil?
I do not. I liked what I saw in New Mexico last week. Used them against Montana State and probably should have won that game outright. I mean, with 5 minutes to go, they're up by 2 scores, and they had the ball. And then they punt, and then a 93-yard touchdown run and a touchdown with 10 seconds left, and they lose to Montana State. But they did have 2 defensive touchdowns during the game. And I don't think they're going to get those defensive touchdowns here against Arizona. The Fafita-McMillan combo is outstanding. I had Arizona by about 31, so I'm laying off this one.
Wyoming and Arizona State from Tempe. Sun Devils are favored by 7, 47.5 total. FS1 at 10:30. Year 2 for Kenny Dillingham, and we're ushering in the Jay Salvell era in Laramie for Wyoming. Dillingham, year 1, went 3-9. Sun Devils at home. This is their opener. They're favored by a touchdown. What's your handicapping of the Sun Devils and the Cowboys, Phil?
Yeah, I think Arizona State's in year 2 of a rebuild, and I think we're going to see Arizona State blossom in Kenny Dillingham's 3rd year, not necessarily this year. When I look at Wyoming, talking to Coach Sawville, he's pretty optimistic about this year. In fact, he loves his quarterback, Evan Svoboda, big boy. He's like 6'5", big kid, and he thinks he's got NFL potential and feels that he'll be an NFL candidate at the end of the year. Now, if that comes to fruition, look out. Now, I don't think Harrison Whitley's going to play. But another thing he said about the running back core when I talked to him was, Phil, this is probably the deepest running back core we have. So it wasn't all about Harrison Whaley. That's one of those where, okay, your top rushers out there not going to be able to run the ball. Not so fast. They've got a pretty deep running back room. So I think Wyoming's scrappy enough. You're going to see a different Wyoming this year. Coach Sawville's going to go for it on 4th down more than Coach Ball went for it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because Coach Ball was very successful being conservative. But overall, I like Wyoming with the chance of the possible upset here. I'm pretty bullish on the Cowboys this year.
All right, let's move to Sunday, another game I'll definitely be watching. This is one of the games on the slate I'm looking forward to the most. USC against LSU. Tigers favored by 4.5. The total is 64.5, 7:30 kick on ABC. Two teams, look, I think Miller Moss and Nussmeier are both capable quarterbacks in this game. USC is going to have to prove it to me before I think they can play defense. I know they're expecting to be improved, and they've got a new defensive coordinator. So does LSU. But again, I don't see any new players coming through the portal or anything. So I'm not sure either one of these defenses are going to be that much improved. I actually like the over, even though it's all the way up to 64.5. I think I'm just going to drink about 10 Miller Lights, take the over, and watch some touchdowns.
I do think both defenses are going to be vastly improved this year. When you look at USC, Danton Lynn steps in.
Yeah.
Last year at UCLA, his first year, they went from allowing 400 yards per game down to 300 yards per game. And not only does he step into USC here, they brought in a ton of transfers, including a couple starters from his secondary at UCLA. I think we will see a vastly improved USC defense this year. And for LSU, they've had talent on the defensive side of the ball. They just haven't played that way. Well, Blake Baker gets the most out of it. And he was Missouri's DC the last 2 years. He had a profound impact there. I think he will have an impact here. Both defenses were below average last year. I think both are going to be above average this year. Meanwhile, offensively, the last time LSU lost a Heisman Trophy candidate, they went from averaging like 48 points per game down to 34 points per game the next year. I do see a drop-off. I don't think it'll be 14 points, but probably by about 7 points offensively. Now, USC knows how to – it's Lincoln Riley. His quarterbacks are always there. Moss had 6 touchdowns in the bowl game. I think it's going to be a great game. I actually lean with the underdog in this because I think we have two teams that mirror each other. They both lose Heisman Trophy quarterbacks. Both have vastly improved defenses. I'll take anything over a field goal in this one. I'll take the dog.
Man, those LSU fans in Sin City in Vegas, that's going to be something. Going head-to-head, toe-to-toe with the degenerates of USC. Two great brands and 2 head coaches beginning year 3. And Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly are forever going to be kind of tethered together because of that wild end of 2021 in the coaching carousel where Riley takes the job, leaving Oklahoma, and Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU. Slight edge for Kelly in 2 seasons, 20-7. Lincoln Riley is 19-8. Hard for either defense to be much worse than what they were a year ago, Phil. So I would agree. After all that, we have just one game that remains. The final game of this 5-day sprint, week 1 of college football, Phil. It's Boston College at 10th-ranked Florida State. Seminoles coming off the loss to Georgia Tech. 16.5-point favorites at home in Tallahassee. 50 is the total. I really like Bill O'Brien. Tripp, you left Charlotte. You didn't get to speak to Bill, but Bill's from that part of the country. This seems like a perfect fit for the Eagles. He played his college football at Brown. That's when his coaching career got started. Thomas Castellanos really carved up the Noles last time these two teams played. Tripp, how you feeling on this game? Let's ask you before we get to Phil.
I like Boston College.
Yeah, I do.
Be honest with you. I think a lot of people want to go FSU automatically coming off a loss. They're going to be fired up. They're back at home. They're ready to play. And I hope that's the case, but I don't know. I think over 2 touchdowns is a lot to cover, 16.5. And I do like the BC quarterback, but yeah, we'll see. My lean would be with Boston College just at first glance.
Yeah, and my lean's going to be with the over. I think when you look at Castellanos, he's a big play waiting to happen. He's going to hurt you with his legs. He's going to throw touchdown passes. He also had 14 interceptions last year, and I could see Florida State getting some of those and maybe getting some scores. I thought Florida State's offensive line underperformed last week. I think we're going to see them play better this week. And overall, I look for to me that the total at 50 is somewhat cheap on this one. I think my computer, if I look at it, had the game at 58. So I'm going to go with over. I think Florida State is a better team. Generally, when a spread moves, they were about a 21-point favorite down to 15. I like to go with the team that benefits from the spread move. But in this case, coming off of Ireland, I don't know about that. So I'm going to go with over.
Don't hate that play either. I think FSU was very methodical in week 1, especially in the first half. It's like they just didn't want to. Maybe they were just expecting, Georgia Tech had a weak defense last year, play it close to the vest, we can get by. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they didn't let DJ Oyunglele throw the ball down the field the first 3 quarters. Then in the fourth quarter, we saw what he can do when he throws the ball down the field. So I think they take the training wheels off of DJ, and that helps you over as well.
And DJ played better than people are giving him credit for. He hit when guys were open, he hit them. He didn't take a lot of sacks. He threw it away. Yeah, he's taken a little more heat than I think he's due, and I have rewatched the game about 18 times by now. So.
I think it was the game plan offensively is what limited him early. They just weren't letting him throw the ball down the field.
Yeah.
They just got so bullied in the trenches against Tech. I did not see that happening. Ran the ball at will, opening drive, and then, what was it, like 20 yards, 50 or 40? It was under 50 the rest of the way. I mean, and 14 combined possessions in that game, too. The fewest we've had in years, Georgia Tech and Florida State. So big bounce back moment for FSU. Phil, it's been tremendous. I'm going to ask for your power plays. We got about a minute. If you've got some favorite picks, I've got mine. So let me go first. I'm going to give you a 5-pack. I love the over in UNC in Minnesota, so I side with you, Phil. Wyoming, -7 on the road at Arizona State. That's fresh on my mind. Your take on the Cowboys. +2, I love the quarterback, Sabota, who is a Mesa native returning home to play in front of family and friends against the Sun Devils. Give me Virginia Tech, 13.5-point favorites to cover at Vanderbilt. Northwestern, only a 3-point favorite. They're going to crush that at home against Miami. And then I got to go Notre Dame. That's my 5th pick. Straight up winner. Give me them. 3-point dog in College Station. Those are my five favorites for week 1.
All right, and I'll throw 3 at you. One's a big favorite, Maryland, -20 over UConn. All you have to do is look at Coach Loxley's first 2 games of the year. He averages 49.6 points per game, and they have a defense. So I'll take a -20. Then I'll give you a couple dogs. Talked about Georgia Southern against Boise. I like Georgia Southern +13. And I like Clemson +13.5 against Georgia. Tripp?
Yeah, I don't hate your over on the FSU Boston College game. I do still lean Boston College, and I really don't like going against one of your top 3 plays. But coming into the day, I still like Georgia. I think they're gonna look really good.
PhilSteele.com is where you can go at PhilSteele042. Follow him on Twitter. Phil, any YouTube weekly tours? Do you got one live coming up Friday, maybe?
Or up today. Up right now. You can get the Phil Steele tour with selections. I have 6 selections up there. They finished out the year last year at 26-12 the last 8 weeks, and it's all free. Plus, you get 3 quick hitters. So 9 free plays right there. Take the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections.
So much more information at philsteele.com. So much space, a limited space than Phil Steele Plus, $99 value, power rating, special teams, pass efficiency, individual team pages on every team, game-by-game stats. So much more information and resources at your fingertips. Check out that Phil Steele YouTube tour, a tour of Phil Steele Plus. Just follow him on Twitter. You'll see the link at philsteele042. At Lock of Doc.
At Locks of the Doc.
At Locks of the Doc.
I have to keep changing it, man. After such a hot start last week, I got a lot of heat on me.
Okay. I'm at Kyle Schassburger. You can follow me. College Colors Day is tomorrow. You can go online, collegecolorsday.com to shop for gear. Download your team-specific College Colors Day logo. We're about to go celebrate in the lobby. Tripp is missing out. FOMO for Phil Steele, I know. College Football Blitz does debut Thursday night, 7 o'clock. Varsity Network app, Stephen Hartzell and company, live play-by-play audio drop-ins all across the country, all the games tonight. And then Saturday, starting at 12 noon, wall-to-wall college football coverage. I know you'll have all the TVs fired up, Phil. All 12 of them, right?
Yeah, all 12. Yep, all day long.
Can't wait to talk next week, man. It's been great.
All right, a lot of fun, guys, as always.